The whispers followed Ethan everywhere in the small coastal town of Seabrook. At 32, his marriage to Eleanor Blackwood, a woman nearly 40 years his senior, had become the favorite topic at the local cafe, the barber shop, and even during Sunday service. Some called him a gold digger, others a manipulator preying on a lonely widow. The kinder ones suggested he was simply confused or perhaps had some sort of maternal complex. But no one, absolutely no one, believed that what they shared was genuine love. "Don't let them get to you," Eleanor would say, her weathered hand squeezing his as they walked along the shoreline, the setting sun painting her silver hair in shades of amber and gold. Her eyes, a striking shade of blue that had maintained their clarity and sharpness despite her 70 years, crinkled at the corners when she smiled at him. "They can't understand what they haven't experienced." Ethan would nod, but the words still stung. He'd grown up in Seabrook, and many of those whispering behind their hands had once been friends, neighbors, even teachers. When he'd left for college at 18, everyone had such high hopes for the bright local boy. No one expected him to return 14 years later with a woman old enough to be his grandmother on his arm and marriage plans in his heart. Their first meeting had been purely chance. Ethan, working as a restoration architect for historical buildings in Boston, had been assigned to assess Eleanor's Victorian mansion that she'd donated to be converted into a community arts center. He'd expected to meet a frail, forgetful old woman. Instead, he found Eleanor in the garden, pruning roses with the precision of a surgeon, quoting architectural principles when he commented on the home's remarkable Queen Anne features. "You know your architecture," he'd said, impressed. "And you assumed I wouldn't." She'd replied with a raised eyebrow and a smile that transformed her face. That first day stretched into hours of conversation about preservation techniques, historical accuracy, and their shared love for buildings with stories embedded in their walls. By the time he left, Ethan knew he wanted to see her again, professionally, of course. Or so he told himself. Their romance developed slowly, beginning with conversations about restoration that evolved into discussions about philosophy, literature, and their lives. Eleanor had lived an extraordinary existence, traveling the world as a photojournalist, documenting revolutions, royal coronations, and everyday life in far-flung corners of the globe. Her home was filled with photographs capturing moments of rare human emotion: joy, grief, triumph, despair. Ethan found himself visiting long after the professional assessment was complete, enthralled by her stories and the quiet wisdom in her eyes. "I fell in love with your mind first," he told her 6 months later, when he finally worked up the courage to take her hand across the antique mahogany table where they shared weekly dinners. "Then your spirit. Then everything else followed." Eleanor had pulled her hand away, her expression troubled. "You're too young, Ethan. I'm at the end of my journey. You're barely halfway through yours." But Ethan persisted. Age was just a number, he argued. Their connection transcended something as trivial as years. After months of gentle pursuit, Eleanor finally agreed to give their relationship a chance, though she remained pragmatic about the challenges they would face. When they announced their engagement, Eleanor's adult children, themselves in their 40s, were horrified. They insisted Ethan must be after her money, her house, or harboring some bizarre fetish. Her daughter Caroline, a cardiothoracic surgeon with her mother's blue eyes and none of her warmth, threatened to contest any will that included him. "Let them think what they will," Eleanor had said with a surprising fierceness. "I've spent my life documenting the world. I recognize authenticity when I see it." They married in a small ceremony with only a handful of guests, mostly Eleanor's old colleagues from her journalism days, who had seen enough of life to withhold judgment. Ethan's parents refused to attend, his father calling the whole thing embarrassing and disturbing. His mother simply cried into the phone, asking where she had gone wrong. When Eleanor suggested they move back to Seabrook to restore an old lighthouse keeper's cottage that Ethan had loved as a child, he agreed, despite knowing they would face scrutiny. He hoped that in time, people would see what he saw. Not an elderly woman, but a vibrant soul with whom he shared a profound connection. Reality proved harsher than anticipated. Old friends avoided him. His former high school crush, now running the local bookstore, asked pointedly if Eleanor had adopted him. The contractor they hired to help with the lighthouse cottage renovation backed out after local gossip suggested Ethan was waiting for Eleanor to kick the bucket so he could inherit the property. Through it all, Eleanor remained unruffled, her dignity intact. She charmed the librarian with discussions about rare first editions, impressed the gruff owner of the hardware store with her knowledge of vintage tools, and volunteered to photograph the town's sesquicentennial celebration. Slowly, some hearts began to thaw, though many remained firmly frozen. "Time reveals truth," she would say, quoting one of her favorite philosophers. "We just need to be patient." Their happiness together was real and tangible, despite the whispers. They restored the cottage together, Eleanor proving surprisingly strong and knowledgeable about historical restoration techniques. They took long walks on the beach, Eleanor pointing out details in light and landscape that Ethan had never noticed before. In the evenings, they read to each other by the fireplace, debated ideas, and planned trips they would take to places Eleanor wanted to show him. The only cloud in their clear blue sky was Eleanor's occasional breathlessness and fatigue. When Ethan suggested seeing a doctor, she dismissed his concerns. "I'm 70, darling. I'm allowed to be tired occasionally." 8 months into their marriage, the invitation arrived. Eleanor's most famous photograph, a haunting image of a child standing amid the rubble of a bombed-out building, reaching toward a shaft of light, had been selected for a major retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. The exhibition would celebrate pioneering female photojournalists of the 20th century. "You should be proud," Ethan said, embracing her. "The world is finally recognizing your brilliance." Eleanor's reaction surprised him. She seemed distracted, almost troubled by the news. "Yes," she said softly. "I suppose they are." The night before they were to leave for New York, Ethan found Eleanor in her study, surrounded by old photographs, journals, and documents. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "Something I should have told you long ago." Ethan sat beside her, taking her cold hands in his. "Whatever it is, it doesn't change how I feel about you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You might feel differently when you know the truth." She showed him a birth certificate first. Hers, apparently. Except according to the document, Eleanor Blackwood had been born in 1974, not 1954 as she had claimed. She would be 50, not 70. Ethan stared at the paper, uncomprehending. "I don't understand." Eleanor took a deep breath and revealed her extraordinary secret. She had been part of a classified CIA program in the early 2000s, using her cover as a photojournalist to gather intelligence in conflict zones. During an operation that went catastrophically wrong, she had been exposed to an experimental compound being developed by a rogue scientist. The compound, intended to accelerate cellular regeneration for military applications, had the opposite effect. It dramatically accelerated her aging process. "Within months, I looked 20 years older," she explained, showing him photographs of her transformation. Within 2 years, I appeared to be in my 60s. The process has slowed now, but doctors say I'm physically around 70, despite being 50 chronologically. She explained how the government had provided her with a new identity, compensation, and the finest medical care, swearing all involved to secrecy. Her first marriage had collapsed under the strain. Her children had adapted to her condition over time, but remained fiercely protective. Their hostility toward Ethan stemmed not from concern about her money, but fear that the truth about their mother might become public, potentially endangering her. "The exhibition is forcing my hand," she said quietly. "Some of my former colleagues will be there, people who knew me before. The truth is going to come out." Ethan sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything. Not because her chronological age was younger than he thought, that seemed almost trivial, but because she had carried this burden alone for so long. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "At first, I couldn't. It was classified. Then, when we grew closer, I was afraid. Not just of the government, but of losing you. I thought if you knew I wasn't really just a normal elderly woman who had lived a full life, but someone whose life had been catastrophically altered, you might see me differently." "As what?" Ethan asked. "As damaged. As a victim. As an experiment gone wrong," she whispered. "Not as the person you fell in love with." Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling the familiar contours of her body, thin but strong, fragile yet resilient. "You are exactly who I fell in love with. Your mind, your spirit, your courage. None of that has changed." The revelation transformed everything and nothing. When they returned from New York, where Eleanor's exhibition had been met with critical acclaim and where she had privately shared her story with select former colleagues, they faced Seabrook together with renewed strength. The truth, carefully managed and selectively shared, silenced the worst of the gossip. Eleanor's children, finally understanding Ethan's genuine love for their mother, began the slow process of accepting him into their family. The town gradually came to see their relationship in a new light, not as something scandalous, but as something brave and true. Eleanor's condition continued to present challenges. Her body was aging faster than it should, requiring careful monitoring and treatment. But there were unexpected gifts too. Her mind remained sharp and young, her spirit undimmed by her physical appearance. One evening, a year after her revelation, they stood together on the widow's walk of their fully restored lighthouse cottage, watching the sun sink into the Atlantic. Eleanor's hands, spotted and veined, rested on the railing beside Ethan's. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me, knowing what you knew?" Eleanor turned to him, the setting sun igniting the silver in her hair. "The only thing I regret is ever doubting what we have. When you've seen as much of life as I have, whether in 70 years or 50 compressed into an accelerated existence, you learn to recognize what matters. And this," she said, placing her hand over his heart, "this is what matters." As Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close against the cooling evening air, he reflected on how strangely life had unfolded. In a world obsessed with youth and appearance, he had found his soulmate in a woman whose exterior belied her years, but whose inner life matched his own so perfectly. The townspeople who had once whispered behind their backs now watched them with a mixture of curiosity and grudging respect. His parents, gradually warming to Eleanor after meeting her several times, had begun to understand what he had seen from the beginning. The truth had not destroyed their love. It had deepened it, adding layers of meaning and purpose. Eleanor's secret had transformed their story from an object of scandal to something people spoke of in hushed, wondering tones. A testament to love's ability to transcend every boundary, even time itself. "Look," Eleanor said, pointing to the first star appearing in the darkening sky. "Make a wish." Ethan smiled, tightening his arms around her. "I already have everything I could wish for." And as night fell over Seabrook, casting the lighthouse cottage in silver moonlight, no one looking at them could doubt the truth of what they shared. A love as real and enduring as the stars emerging one by one above the vast, timeless sea.